Dave Palumbo with another RX Muscle rant. The Rich Piana autopsy report has been revealed. We've been waiting weeks, maybe months at this point by now, and it seems like our old friend Anthony Roberts seems to have dug up the autopsy. Little did I know that you could even get an autopsy report released. I thought it was some sort of a HIPAA violation. Evidently it's not. In the state of Florida, you can request it. I have the paperwork here. Anthony Roberts requested it from Deborah Lewis, the records custodian at the District 6 Medical Examiner's Office. She replied that she would submit it to him, and she sent it to him digitally. And he released the report as well as a little write-up about what was said in the report. And I know a lot of people are trying to report on it and play on the Rich Piana, popularity, I guess you could say. But I wasn't so satisfied with what I saw, especially since the cause of death was considered undetermined. And that to me rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, and it made me suspicious. Because here we have a 46-year-old guy, he's a celebrity. You'd have to suspect possible foul play here, because guys that are in their early to mid 40s don't just drop dead, and if they do, you'd want to know why. And to do an autopsy and not be able to determine that at the end of the autopsy is troubling to me. So I called my medical friends that I know, and I talked to actually a medical examiner, a really good one, and we went through the report, and here's my analysis of what went on, which means that nothing in the long scheme of things, I have no credentials whatsoever. I'm just another guy with an opinion. So if you want to listen, listen. If you don't like it, tune out. All right, so my first impression was that, there was nothing grossly really wrong with his body, which is kind of weird. Okay, yeah, he had an enlarged heart, which most bodybuilders do, meaning cardiomyopathy or cardiomegaly, I guess you'd call it. The left ventricle, right ventricle, a little bigger. The left ventricle in most bodybuilders is enlarged. Why? Because the bodies have to pump extra blood to all the muscles when you're training, and that causes an enlargement. Now, whether it's a sports enlargement or athletic enlargement, as we call it, or it's some kind of a defective heart enlargement, we don't really know for sure. But it seemed like, Rich wasn't out of breath or anything like that. I never saw him, struggling to breathe or to, do anything athletic. So I have to assume that it was an athletic enlargement, which doesn't mean that that's a good thing. Because when your left ventricle, the left ventricle of the heart, the wall of the heart is thicker than it normally is, you're at a greater risk for arrhythmias. And what are arrhythmias? Arrhythmias are weird rhythms in the heart. And if the heart throws a weird rhythm, because it takes longer for the signal, the electrical signal to get through this thicker ventricle, it could throw the heart completely out of whack, and you can die instantly from that. And certain substances can make that worse, okay? Stimulants, cocaine can induce arrhythmias, and especially in an enlarged heart, it would make it more prevalent, or the chances much more likely, and the outcome could be much more deadly. But we'll get to that in a minute. So the thing, though, that really struck me was that no toxicology was done, or at least this medical examiner's office, which is not in the hospital, the medical examiner's office who did the autopsy, didn't have access to any toxicology specimens, meaning that the blood work or tissue samples that they may have taken when he came in. Now, this is weird right off the bat, that they didn't save these, okay? But he was on a ventilator in the hospital for 18 days, so there's a possibility that after 2 weeks they threw him out. I don't know. But the fact that the medical examiner didn't make a call to the hospital to ask them, hey guys, what was the toxicology results when this guy came in? Because remember, when they found Rich unconscious in his place, the ambulance, they found on his table, on his kitchen table, a mound of powder. Okay, and as much as his girlfriend would like us to believe that it was a pre-workout that was the ground that was sitting there, we know otherwise. Okay, there was obviously some recreational drugs at use. I have heard, rumors of cocaine, OxyContin usage. No confirmation, of course, and since we don't have the results, we can't verify that. But I'm sure when he was admitted to the hospital, they did a toxicology screening because they would want to know, hey, how could we treat this guy? Is he in drug overdose? Is he in respiratory arrest because he took too many Percocets, opioids? Is he toxic because he did a shot of heroin and he's going to die because of respiratory suppression. So these are all things that are, you know, that would be possibilities that they wouldn't know the answer to unless they did a tox screening, which I'm sure they did. So they did the tox screening. Evidently, they threw out the blood vials after a certain time, so the medical examiner didn't have access to that when he requested it. But why wouldn't he just call the hospital and say, hey, can you look at this guy's chart? Can you find out? I would like to see the results of the tox screening. Because how do we know that someone didn't show up at his apartment and inject him with 10 cc's of insulin and kill him? We wouldn't know that because we have no toxicology results here. And as a matter of fact, on the autopsy report here, it says that despite specific requests for these specimens, the hospital discarded these admission specimens, and his reported history of drug use and cause and manner of death cannot be determined with any certainty because of this. So basically what the medical examiner is saying is maybe it was cocaine overdose, maybe cocaine did throw an arrhythmia, you know, and cause him to, you know, go down with a heart attack, you know, in essence. But we don't know because we don't have any specimens. So if I'm the medical examiner, I'm examining a guy who's on TMZ, he weighs 290 pounds, he's got 25-inch arms, he's tattooed all over the place. You'd think he'd say, pick up the phone and call the hospital because nothing else was really remarkable. If you look at the autopsy, he did have some pleural effusions, which is fluid in his lungs, but that's consistent with being on a respirator for 18 days. His brain was necrotic, but that's also consistent with the fact that he might have had oxygen deprivation because his heart went, you know, through an arrhythmia, and obviously you're going to get tissue death in the brain when there's no oxygen to those brain cells. So that's consistent. Yeah, he was a little jaundiced, but that's also very consistent with being on a ventilator in a hospital, you know, for 18 days, and when your body's shutting down. And ascites, which is fluid in the abdominal cavity, is also very consistent with being on a ventilator. If you looked at and read, you know, the gross, you know, description of what he looked like, he had, you know, PICC lines in, he had catheter in his penis, he had a rectal tube in his, I mean, he had a feeding tube. This guy's body was not functioning once he was admitted to the hospital in a coma, okay? So they were basically sustaining all his life processes. You know, that's going to lead to a lot of these gross findings that they found, you know, in the lungs. And so his liver was fine if you look at the inspection, but was he jaundiced? Yeah, because probably his organs weren't functioning well. His brain is necrotic because the cells are dying there, or they died and now they're getting worse because of the fact that he had oxygen deprivation to his brain. What was the cause of the oxygen deprivation? Personally, my theory is, after looking at all this and looking over everything, I think he threw, and this is, you know, I'm not going to, you know, name his name, but the medical examiner I talked to, we both feel that it was probably an arrhythmia thrown by some sort of a drug, you know, cocktail that he was using. He went down immediately, which is why he fell. You know, arrhythmias, once you get a heart arrhythmia, you're done. You go down, okay? You're out cold. He hit his head, but I don't think he hit his head hard enough to cause any damage whatsoever, because there's no, if you look at the report, it actually says on inspection, there's evidence, where it says evidence of recent injury, none. So there was no contusions, nothing like that. So he obviously didn't hit himself very hard. He basically had a heart attack, you know, because of an arrhythmia, and luckily he lived, you know, not luckily because he didn't make it, but he lived long enough to get him to the hospital and put him on life support. And obviously he had enough brain damage to his brain during that interim where he was without oxygen, that he was never going to recover, unfortunately. And that's the sad truth of it. The fact, though, that we have no conclusion on this autopsy leaves me with a very uneasy feeling. Even though I can create a scenario that I think was the case, I don't know for sure. And with a 46-year-old type of celebrity guy who had people who loved him and hated him, I have to suspect, what if there was a homicide here? What if there was foul play here? We don't know this for a fact. I would love to see this be picked up by another medical examiner and delved into more deeply, because we really don't know what happened. There's no closure here as far as I'm concerned, other than speculation and a theory that we can create to make ourselves feel like we have closure. But I don't have closure here, because I don't understand why the medical examiner was so lazy that he couldn't pick up the goddamn phone and call the hospital and ask for the toxicology report. Okay? Unless someone's hiding something. That's what it seems like. Specimens were thrown out in the hospital, even though they were asked for, specifically requested to be retained. Okay, so someone threw those out. Why someone threw them out, we don't know. Okay, we also don't know why the toxicology report that had to have been run when he got admitted to the hospital would not be included in this autopsy. Why this medical examiner did not think, hey, this is important enough that I should make a phone call and see what's going on. This smells cover up to me, and I don't like the way it smells. It stinks to me, and I would demand out there, and all you guys who are watching, I would make the same demands, put it all over every place, that we have this autopsy re-looked at by someone who's competent and knows what they're doing, so we can find out what really happened. I'm pissed. I consider Rich a friend, and you know what? I want to see what happened to my friend, and you should all too. Dave Palumbo here with another RX Muscle Rant.